Good afternoon, everyone. I love that fucking enthusiasm in the room. Should we try one more time? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Awesome, very good. So my name is Magith Noohukhan. I'm the Evangelist at Braze, meaning I represent our company globally, creating awareness around customer engagement and how brands should engage with their consumers and vice versa. And just because you asked, many people really don't know what an evangelist does. And for those of you who do not know, what I usually say is, it's very similar like what Jesus Christ did for Christianity, right? And I do that for Braze. And the only difference here is that I get paid to do this job. And today I thought, I would share with you a topic around customer engagement. And before we jump into that, I'm super excited to be here today, and Sultan, thank you very much for having me as well. I live in London for the last 8 months, and before that I've been living in Germany for the last 12 years, but I grew up in India. The first game that I remembered playing was actually the brick game. I don't know how many of you remember that. It's kind of the Tetris game, and they have a device, right, specifically designed to play that game, and only that game, and you cannot really do anything other than that. And then, early 2000, we started with the snake game in Nokia. How many of you remember that? The snake game, apparently everyone, right? And all these games are like not connected to one another at all, right? So that was it. So these were the two games that I was playing with, and apparently most of you were playing that as well. So now, the last 10 to 15 years, there is a fundamental shift in how consumers play game, how consumers engage with the gaming brands, and also how gaming brands engage with the customers as well, right? As a consumer, now they have multiple opportunities to interact with your brand and also play. So let that be on the mobile phone, let that be on the desktop, let that be on tablets and also on TVs, and also there are like multiple ways to interact with your brand. For example, the evolution of ambient devices, for example, Amazon Alexa and Google Home. And on top of that, as a brand, you have the opportunity to interact with your consumers. When I say your consumers, your clients have the opportunity to interact with the consumer in the middle through multiple channels. So that be email, push notifications, the mobile push notification, web push notifications. Then on top of that, we have SMS, and also platforms are constantly evolving, right? So Facebook, Instagram. When platforms like this evolve, brands are collecting more and more data from the consumers as well. But the point here is your clients, that is the brand sitting on top, trying to get the attention of the user in the middle, right? And it's not just one of your brands. There are hundreds of other brands trying to get the attention of that user in the middle. And I talked about collecting data, right? Brands are trying to collect as much as data as possible, but yet failing to create personalized and relevant experience to their users, right? So that's why we as a brand, we really believe in forging human connections between consumers and the brands they love, and also creating memorable experience. So as a company, as a client of yours, they should be very careful in what are the data that they are collecting, but also informing your users why they are collecting the data for, and what are the different purposes, how they are going to use that multiple data collections. And we did some research with a company called Forrester Research, so it's basically a research company, and asking them, what do users expect from a brand, right? How would they like to be communicated? Data is a complicated topic, right? So they would expect, the users would expect brands to speak to them like a regular person would. If you look at the top 5 points, that's exactly what it talks about, right? Communicate with me using the contact method I prefer, talk to me like as a normal person would, and also help me understand why should I be engaging with your brand, right? So these are 10 different points that we came across throughout the interview, and it is a global interview that we actually did. And also the other points that we have gathered is that when a client of yours, if they could establish the communication on a more human and personalized way, it is more likely that their customers will be satisfied with the brand, but also at the same time more likely that they would recommend the brands to their friends and contacts. And also Having loyal customers is really important for retention, and if you could establish that human and personalized relevant communication, 65% more loyal customers would be up in the mark if you could actually just do that. So basically taking care of the way that you communicate with the data that you actually collect. I don't know how many of you know, more than 50% of the people, they say it's okay for them to give consent to brands about using their data if the brand could create relevant experience, right? Why do brands, you think, fail in creating that experience? They are more interested in the KPIs of driving businesses than actually thinking about if the brand is satisfying their needs with the customers by creating that communication. And we believe that's what is failing in the industry. So the question that you wanted to ask your clients is that, are they creating this brilliant customer experiences? And one of the first things that we really talk about is that to have a great product plus experience. A combination of these two will create a long-term relationship, right? So first of all, they should have like a great product. If they don't have a great product, then that's a completely another topic to talk about. But an experience around that product plays a vitally important role in building that long-term relationship. So I'm going to cover these 4 topics in customer engagement. So the first one is customer retention, and then obviously I talked about loyalty, and also creating customer value is vitally important for high value action for every businesses, and of course driving profit and revenue is also key. So the topic that I'm going to cover from this point in time, the first one is starting with activation, right? So I have brought an example from the customer so that consider this as a best practice, and when you go back to your company, when you talk to your clients, let them think about these 4 points and how they can actually use this in the business when they try and use the customer data. The first one, the moment when somebody signs up in any gaming app, for instance, right? Be very honest and ask them to give you permissions of what are the different criteria that they can use their data for. Starting with, can they send you updates about their product features? Can they send updates about marketing features? Can they use location or can they not? Can they inform them about anything that's happening inside any games, for instance? For example, if they win awards. And then on the right-hand side, what you see here is called priming for permissions. For instance, when users download their app, doesn't mean that they are giving you permission to send a push notification, right? If they do not, then just don't send it. There are some apps where we can actually send push notifications without the consent from the service providers, but in this case, if you don't have that, just don't send it. And on the other hand, you can send an in-app message, for example, and saying, would you like to opt in for the push notification? If they say yes, then you have the right to do it. It's basically respecting the privacy of the users from the very beginning when someone start using their app. And the second is determining the experience level of the player, right? So that starts with collecting information about the experience. If they are like a beginner, if they have an intermediate level of experience, or if they are an expert in the particular gaming that they are going to play. And also it would really help them to collect information about the sports enthusiasm that they have with specific gaming, for instance. And based on that, you can create messages in such a way that would focus more on the beginner level so that it's more personalized, more tailored toward that single audience than actually putting 1 million audiences in one segment and sending a batch and blast message, right? So this would create much more relevant experience where users think, okay, the gaming brand is really utilizing all the data that I have provided in creating experience that is more relevant for me rather than they are targeting a whole market with their message. And also, if you look at the middle one here, it's from DraftKings, a betting company from the US, where they say there are no tricks placed in our emails, right? So they are very transparent about how they are going to send that email. They are not going to trick you into doing anything with their emails. It's about creating trust, right? As gaming industry, I believe there is a lack of trust when people start to play because that is coming from the culture of gambling, right? So if you could establish the trust from the very beginning, there is a high chance that people will trust your brand, and also they would understand that you would respect their privacy and also create more relevant experience. And encouraging, and during the process of onboarding, the second stage would be, helping them to share social, right? So if they know that, their friends are playing a game together with them, or their friends are using a particular app, then that would encourage them as well to be more involved in the gaming that you are actually in. So these are the 4 steps in terms of activation. Try and build trust, respect your users' privacy. If you're collecting data, then make sure that you are collecting data for the right reasons, and also don't send them irrelevant messages. Use that data, put the data to build a more meaningful conversation. And this is a case study from the company, again, DraftKings. So if your clients are collecting the location data of your users, for example, in the US, there are specific states where you are not allowed to play a certain game, right? So using the location data of the users, you can clearly target and say, sorry, you are not allowed to play that game. And there are not many brands who actually does that, right? So that's why I mentioned, it's not just about collecting data, it's about putting that data for use. If you have the location data of the user where it is not allowed to play that game, promptly tell them so. And not just for gaming, for example, everybody loves it when they could get an overview of how many games that they have played for a certain period of time, how much money that they have made, and these are all the data that these gambling companies have, right? But how many companies do you think that they really put that data to use and send a relevant message like that? Not many brands do that, right? So this is my point. When it comes to personalization and relevancy, use all the data that is available to create a memorable experience of your consumers. If you could do that, if your clients could do that, then they would be long way with the journey that you are in than actually moving to another brand. Engagement. So this is another important part about customer engagement. Education based on user personas, right? For example, if your customers are starting with the beginning journey of a certain gaming, what do you think users really need? Education around gambling, right? For example, I started with gambling in boxing, and I used a few brands. I'm not going to name which brands those are, but I have to switch brands because I felt like there wasn't enough information for me to learn about the different arts, so that I have been switching brands until I found the one which educated me with the right resources, with the right tutorials, so that I know these are the things that I need to know to be successful in gambling. So you have to understand the user personas so that you can target them with the right message. And DraftKings does an extraordinary job. For example, if you're not familiar with NBA, they would send you all the tutorials that's needed for the NBA gambling. Similarly, for every other games that they're in, they have collection of educational materials. So they understand the user persona first, they understand the sports enthusiasm, they understand the level of the player they experience, and then they decide based on the segmentation, okay, this is what our first user needs, so that they are being educated. Dormancy is nothing but churning, right? So for example, in reality though, every time one of your clients acquire one new customer, that customer will churn after 12 months. So the challenge for your customers would be, it's not about retaining them throughout the whole period, but then making them come back, let's say after a month, after 2 months, so that they are not declining after 12 months. Couple of tips around that is, why do you think people churn? Because they are not interested in the game. One, they do not have enough materials to be winning in that particular gambling, and then they do not find it very entertaining, right? So you can use for win-back campaigns. There are like a lot of materials that you can use, a lot of strategies around it that you can use to clearly narrate and target those customers. For example, with articles that are related to that gambling. If something is coming new in the industry, what can you use based on the user personas that they have, so that you make them want to come back? And that's all about personalization, right? You want to make them come back and not let them churn after a certain period of time. Monetization, important for all the companies that actually runs businesses. So a couple of tips around that. For example, before, when somebody purchases a certain criteria or certain promotions from the gambling brand that's engaging with their consumers, it's vitally important for them to create a sense of urgency. I talked about push notification, right? So there might be something happening in the industry, some games that pop up all of a sudden, you wanted to alert them spontaneously, so you would use push notification. But do people engage with push notification all the time? For example, if you tell them to spend $5, they probably wouldn't. And the best practice that we see from companies, what they do is to create a range of prices so that people have the option to buy one of those, and which we think is bringing much more conversions to the gaming industry now than actually before. And all these different channels, right? When they are in web, you can send a push notification, or it could be a mobile push, it could be email, so alerting them and finding the right channel to engage with all these users from gaming industry is vitally important to make them be more active and also want to keep them coming back. And there are a couple of points about pre and post purchases. For example, in terms of monetization, what do you do before when the users purchase a certain patent, or after when they purchase, right? So one of the points about the pre-purchase is integrating the user's guide and adding value to the items that you are trying to sell, right? So nobody wants to spend money unless they know what they are getting out of that, right? For example, if I would put in $10, I would expect a return of at least 20 in gambling. That's how it works. So if you could clearly make them understand, if I could spend $10, this is the return that I'm going to get if I would gamble in this particular gambling, right? But also on the post-purchase part, you have to help them understand through developed tutorials to make repeat purchase. It's not just about purchasing once and then forgetting about it. It's about constantly making them come back and also constantly making them repurchase. The whole point about all these things that I have been telling you for the last 15 minutes is about the customer, right? Companies will collect data, and companies have to constantly collect data, but if companies wouldn't put the data to the best of their use, there will be constantly new regulations that will come into play. For example, like GDPR, like CCPA in the US, there could be revolutions around these regulations that would never stop unless the companies would put forth the best use of the data that they collect. Companies should be putting forth the idea of transparency. Companies should be putting forth the idea of respecting people's privacy and also constantly communicating, this is how we are going to protect your data against theft, and also around privacy. And this is the framework that we think many companies are using who are actually really successful, is like listening to the data that your clients receive from your customers, and also understanding that data, creating different segments, creating personalized messages and targeting those messages through different channels. So let that be mobile, let that be email, let that be web push, let that be all the other devices that are constantly being evolved. Because if you don't put forth the better use of the data, then there is a high chance that your customers, your clients' customers won't stay long with their business. Because like I said, at the end of the day, platforms and channels and devices constantly evolve. I believe smartwatch is the most personal device that's being developed yet, but there would be much more personal devices that would be being built, which will be available in the next few years. But what do brands have to do? Always think about the consumers, because the consumers change with devices. The preferences of the consumers, the behavior of the consumers will change in a much faster pace than companies can adapt to. So how can companies prepare themselves to target that guy in the middle, because that person is the most important person for every businesses. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is personalization in the age of privacy. Thank you very much.